How's it, everybody? Welcome back to the Fontainer. Some exciting news to bring you. Newcastle have officially announced a new CEO. So the new CEO of Newcastle is going to be David Hopkinson. He takes over officially on Friday, the 5th of September, from Darren Eales, who has been battling with a long-term health issue. We'll talk about Darren Eales at the end, but Darren Eales joined Newcastle on the 15th of July 2022, so he'd been in the position for over 3 years. We'll capture Darren Eales at the end of the video, but let's first talk about David Hopkinson. So what do we know about David Hopkinson? Well, the club have released an official statement confirming the appointment of David Hopkinson. The club announcement reads as follows: Newcastle are delighted to announce the appointment of David Hopkinson as the club's new Chief Executive Officer. David officially joins the club on Friday the 5th of September and will undertake a comprehensive handover process, supporting by the outgoing CEO Darren Eales, who steps down from the position for health reasons. David brings more than 25 years of senior executive leadership and commercial expertise across 3 countries, delivering results for some of the world's most iconic and valuable sporting organizations. I'm going to put David Hopkinson's work experience up here so you can have a look, but you can clearly see that he's come from Madison Garden Sports Corporation. He's been there for 3 years and 7 months. Fundamentally, he led the business operations for the New York Knicks and the New York Rangers over in the US, which is obviously the basketball and the ice hockey team in New York. They are amongst the most valuable franchises, and obviously they compete at the world-renowned Madison Square Garden, which I've been to a few times, and it's an absolutely amazing experience. Previously, he was the global head of partnerships at Real Madrid, where he served on the executive team as they cemented their place as the world's most valuable football club. I'm going to put up a couple of graphics in a minute regarding revenue and wages as well, which will be hot on the agenda for David. He was at Real Madrid in that period where they were looking at redeveloping the Bernabeu, obviously to increase revenue and so on. So very much on the agenda for Newcastle, and perhaps a sign of things to come. And then before being at Madrid, as you can see, he was the COO at Maple Leaf Sports Entertainment, overseeing commercial activities for NHL's Toronto Maple Leafs and NBA Toronto Rapids. So a change of direction, a new country in terms of where he's going to be working. So he's obviously been working in Canada, Spain, over in the US, and now in the UK, in England. Not his first experience in football per se, because obviously as you saw on that graphic, he'd been at Real Madrid. But this is obviously a step up in terms of his first CEO role. So is this a promotion for him? You know, is he going to be a long-term? Well, I suppose only time will tell. But I've been calling out for this for a very long time. I think Darren Eales, he announced that he was leaving back in February. That was 7 months ago. So in terms of Newcastle's search for the right candidate, he obviously had to give notice in his current role. But an exciting time to announce, the transfer window's closed. Newcastle have a lot on their agenda in terms of PSR challenges, financial control, the stadium, everything within the CEO's remit, which we're going to cover in this video. So I'm going to put a graphic up over here about Newcastle's corporate structure. It does date back from July 2024, but I have highlighted a couple of roles which contain the names of, as you can see, Darren Eales as the current CEO, not from tomorrow. Obviously, Paul Mitchell, which is the outstanding position in terms of one we still need to fill. And then you can see Eddie Howe there in terms of managing all our expectations and, the media as well. As you can see, the top 2 lines are basically the ownership structure. You've then got David Hopkinson replacing Darren Eales as the CEO. And as I said before, one of the biggest things on his remit is going to be a replacement for a sporting director. That's not been confirmed by the club. There are a couple of rumours and names being bandied about, but I do think that's going to be key for Newcastle to be that direct link into which Eddie Howe will be directly reporting. And then being the ear of Eddie Howe and then filtering that back up to the CEO to kind of make the most executive decisions. At boardroom level, Brad Miller, Simon Caper, Peter Silverstone are currently all in their existing positions. In terms of David Hopkinson's previous experience, something that's going to be very key for us is looking at increasing Newcastle's revenue. Again, I'm going to put another graphic up here. This is not from last season. This is from 2 seasons ago, so slightly outdated, but I think the numbers are still reflective of the current standing in terms of where clubs are regarding spend. As you can see, Manchester City way up there in terms of revenue, 719 million. How much of that is actually legitimate legal earnings? We'll find out when Man City's court cases come to fruition. But next on the list, you can see Man United in terms of being that global brand, 662 million. And this is over 1 calendar year. You've then got the big four completed by Liverpool and Arsenal. Tottenham Hotspur are an interesting one in terms of being above Chelsea. You would generally think in football terms, Chelsea historically over the last 10, 15 years would be above Tottenham. The big reason for that is Tottenham Hotspur's new stadium. Chelsea actually rank 11th in terms of the capacity of their stadium being just over 40,000, and Tottenham Hotspur have got the second biggest stadium in the Premier League at just under 63,000. So in terms of the revenue, the stadium capacities have a huge impact on revenue, and it is one of the things I want to speak about in terms of Newcastle increasing revenue and fighting back legitimately against PSR. If Tottenham Hotspur can do it in terms of their revenue that they're bringing into the club and their facility that they have, which is an unbelievable stadium, there's absolutely no reason with the Saudi backing that Newcastle can't do the same. But the interesting thing is if you look at this list, the top 6 clubs or the big 6 clubs are generally the ones fighting at the top of the Premier League table. The big anomaly there is obviously Manchester United, which points a lot to how they've fallen from grace in terms of how much revenue the club is bringing in versus the results on the pitch in terms of their Premier League performance over the last couple of years. Then you can clearly see on the graphic that Newcastle's revenue is around this £320 million mark, and that ranks them at 7th in the league. You've obviously got Aston Villa as well. One of the biggest things about this is that this doesn't take into account the wealth of the ownership. This is purely how much money the club makes in the course of a season through to sponsorships. That's the names on the shirts, that's the branding around the stadiums, that's the training kit sponsors, that's stadium names, player sales versus players outgoing. But the big one here that I want to focus on is match day revenue. Match day revenue includes obviously the general season tickets, ticket balancing, corporate tickets, hospitality tickets. And the next graphic I want to show is the actual Premier League clubs' revenue and wage costs. Again, this is from the 2023-2024 season, so this is not the season just past. The list is ordered by revenue, but if you actually look at the wage costs comparatively, Chelsea's wage costs and Liverpool's wage costs are pretty high. Man City do have the highest wage costs, but their actual wages to revenue percentage is actually pretty low if you compare that to, for example, Everton, Fulham and Wolves and Nottingham Forest, who are spending a huge amount of their revenue directly to players' wages. And this is one of the challenges that the CEO and the sporting director, but fundamentally this is going to be on David Hopkinson's agenda. He's going to be looking at data like this in the first couple of days to get a grip of the financial health and status of Newcastle in terms of how much money are we bringing in, where's that coming from, what's the ticket pricing looking like, how much money are we paying on our players, how does this compare to our rivals, how does this compare to the teams that we want to be above. If Newcastle can bring more revenue in, this has a direct impact, as I said before, on ticket prices, so we do need to bear that in mind. There's going to be uproar if Newcastle start doubling their ticket prices. We'll see the difference in the pricing on the Champions League, and again that obviously brings additional revenue to the club, a huge amount of revenue. but it has a direct impact on transfer budgets as well. Darren Eales did say at some point Newcastle was going to have to do some player trading. At the time, a lot of us were worried that it meant that we're going to have to sell one of our star players against our will and against our wishes. I do wonder if the Alexander Isak saga over the summer will, in hindsight, be seen as a silver lining in terms of selling a great player that we didn't eventually want because of how everything unfolded in terms of the player really pushing for the leave, etc., etc. We fundamentally got a British record fee for a player we fundamentally didn't want to lose, but we've strengthened the overall squad massively in all areas, goalkeeper, defence, midfield, but not in the attacking areas. But let's see what Visa and Big Mick do for us this season. I do think one of the things that may have attracted David to the position at Newcastle would have been the project that people speak about in terms of where Newcastle can go. I don't think the ownership structure at Newcastle are worried about spending money. The issue is how do we legitimately bring money in as profit? Because we can't just bankroll and dig into the pockets of our owner. That's not how the Premier League PSR financial fair play system works. If that was the case, we would have bought XYZ by now, but we haven't been able to do that. That's just the facts of it. I don't want to complain and bitch about that. That just is what it is. So if you know the rules of the game, you need to aggressively play by them and stretch the boundaries as much as we possibly can. What that really means is how can Newcastle legitimately increase their revenue? Now, one of the things which boggles my mind is that we do not have a training kit sponsor. This is a huge missed opportunity. I don't understand why the commercial guys have not managed to get a training ground or a training kit sponsor. For example, Adidas became our kit sponsor last year. They're paying us £30 million a year. Seller became the main shirt sponsor. We're getting £25 million a year from them as well. The training kit sponsor, you're probably not going to get as much for that because it's not shown live during the games, the highlights, the newspapers are not going to be full of it. But a lot of the media is focused on midweek when the players are training. They've got to be more aggressive in terms of getting the training ground sponsored, in terms of getting the training kits. Those are two very easy and quick wins. In terms of the training ground, please check the link below. Newcastle did get planning approval to extend their training ground a couple of weeks ago. There's been no official mention of that from the club. Does that actually mean they're looking at a new venue and they're therefore not going to do the upgrade works? Or does it just mean that it's quite low on the agenda? I personally think that if they were going to do the work, we would have heard about it by now, and that there's something in the pipeline regarding a new training ground, because why would you spend money on something that you're just going to break down in a couple of years? And if you do get a new training ground, you get a huge sponsor behind it. Look at Liverpool's AXA training ground. It's world class. These things matter to players because it's their actual place of work Monday to Friday, unless they're playing midweek games. But that's where they go. When they walk into those facilities, that's what sets the tone for them in terms of performance and achievement. That is their backstage hub. The stadium is center stage. And talking about the stadium, I definitely think this is going to be very high up on the agenda of our new CEO. We have to get some news and announcement on St James's Park. Obviously, the fan base is slightly divided in terms of increasing the capacity at St James's Park and the history of it. But because of planning restrictions and the leased buildings around the stadium, expanding St James's Park is not going to directly increase our revenue. We're not going to go from a 52,000 seater up to a level which Tottenham Hotspur have at the moment, which, as I've just shown, it had a massive impact on increasing their revenue. One of the biggest things here is about being able to pay players higher salaries. Now, I don't want to be Captain Hindsight here, but if theoretically we had said to Alexander Isak or Dean Mitchell had said to Alexander Isak last summer, yeah, we can give you, an extra £20,000, but that means Bruno's going to go up, Tonali's going to go up, Gordon is going to go up. Everyone's wage structure is going to go up slightly. That's the only way that Newcastle are going to get to the next level where they are regularly competing. What Eddie Howe has done with the squad in terms of the size and the salaries that we can offer players is unbelievable. I mean, the guy is nailed on to be the next England manager. I do generally think the captain should be one of the higher earners at the club. I think we're fortunate in the terms that Bruno is one of our best players as well. So it makes complete sense that he should be on the higher salary. But Newcastle are offering our best players between the 160 and the 120 grand mark. It is reported that Kieran Trippier was on the same salary as Alexander Isak. Matt Targett was on 100 grand a week, which is absolutely bonkers. And this is something that Newcastle are going to have to get right. But to be able to offer a higher salary to a higher caliber of player, we are only going to be able to do that if we increase our revenue. And this has to be objective number one for the CEO and the sporting director, whoever that may be. And the easiest and the quickest way to do that is by getting new sponsorships and increasing our stadium capacity. Whether or not that's increasing St James's Park or building a new stadium, my personal preference would be to build a new stadium at Leazes Park, follow Tottenham Hotspur's blueprint, and build a completely new state-of-the-art stadium where you've got that huge tier of ticketing in terms of the mass of the supporters. Tickets can stay hopefully roughly the same. And then that asset is earning money from you outside of football, where you've got concerts, rugby league, NFL, etc., etc. So let's wrap things up here. Welcome to Newcastle, David Hopkinson, and probably most importantly, let's say a fond farewell to Darren Eales. Thank you for everything you've done for the club. We all wish him well on his journey to recovery, hopefully, and he deserves to rest and just focus on his health now. What do you think should be the priority on David Hopkinson's agenda? Should it be increasing the revenue of the club? Should it be the stadium, the training grounds? Should we be looking at the player squad? Should we be anticipating the players' contracts? Any players that are running out soon? Any players that are high flight risks, for example, in terms of Tino Livramento to Man City? When we've looked at the summer and we've looked at the last 12 months at what's happened with Alexander Isak, we have to take these things on the chin and learn from them going forward so that we don't have this drama and saga again, and Newcastle can move forward and become a stronger club both financially and on the results side of things. So if you like this content, please do give us a like and subscribe, and don't forget,